Hello, hello. We have a bit of a wonky schedule this week, so I figured I'd just go ahead and quickly record myself lecturing about photosynthesis. It shouldn't be a topic that you've never heard before or a word necessarily that you haven't heard before. I know you guys learned about photosynthesis in middle school, and I'm sure you've heard about it since then. So it shouldn't be too much of a difficult topic to pick up on your own. But this is going to be more like a flipped classroom for you guys on you folks on B Day because of that wonky schedule. So Wednesday, we will we'll come together and talk about any misconceptions or questions that you may have about it, and we'll continue from there. So I'm on my third period Google Classroom because I already have everything uploaded there for them, and I just wanted to run through the agenda really quickly and then show you how to get to everything and then jump into the material. So our agenda is photosynthesis PowerPoint with guided notes as usual. Those guided notes can be located down here at the bottom, this little purple box. They're also uploaded onto the class website. Then the next step is the photosynthesis labeling. That's just something that we're doing to organize our thoughts at the end of the lecture. I will have a separate small video going over the answers and the thought process behind those answers, but that is meant to be completed in class. The independent practice, which needs to be submitted, is titled Photosynthesis Independent Practice. I even put a little thing next to it that says turn in. If you are in our sheltered program, I do have some options here for you to look through the Spanish photosynthesis PowerPoint and then a Spanish version of the photosynthesis independent work. The labeling is the same because it's primarily images and molecules, which are going to be the same across languages. But you can thank Ms. Garcia for those. She helped translate that material. So let's jump into it. I'm going to go through the English version. It says Energy Conversions PowerPoint, and then the Spanish version is to the right, the other green box here. So let me go ahead and, actually I've already got it open. Let me think about it for a second. So photosynthesis, woo, such a great topic. Photosynthesis is important to discuss because it occurs in a lot of eukaryotic cells, primarily plant cells. But we do see that there are specific organelles that all of our eukaryotic cells have. I mean, we've talked about the Golgi apparatus, endoplasmic reticulums, the nucleus, DNA in general, cytoplasm. We could go on and on. But all eukaryotic cells have mitochondria, and those mitochondria help them to convert energy from food into usable ATP. Now, this is a little different for plant cells because plant cells don't consume food, right? Do your flowers or trees that are outside of your home, do they eat the bugs around them, or do they eat us? No, they don't consume food like we would consume other organisms or other plants. So they actually have the capability of making their own food, and we've termed that autotrophic or an autotroph. Now, this word is not new to you. We have brought it up in class before, but just as a reminder, an autotroph is an organism that can make their own food. And we're usually going to see the process that they're using to make their own food. They're usually going to be using photosynthesis. Okay, photosynthesis. Now, if we just dissect what's going on in photosynthesis, okay, we basically have an entire equation that kind of says, okay, we need these things in order to make that. What we're trying to make is our food. Okay, so if you look to the right on the equation, we'll see glucose and oxygen. Those are our products. Those are what we want to make. That's our goal. Okay, glucose is their food. Oxygen just happens to be a byproduct. Again, that word product. That's what the plants are making, is glucose and oxygen. Now, what are they using? What ingredients are they using to make those products? That would be water, carbon dioxide, and some form of energy. Okay, water, carbon dioxide, some form of energy. Now, looking at it in this term, or this way, kind of may be like, wait, what? Picture a plant. What do you have to do to the plant? You have to water it. Gulp, 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 gulp. You have to water the plant. Sometimes we water too much, but it's a discussion for another date. Plants need water, okay? They also need carbon dioxide, which is something that we breathe out. So it's a good exchange of we need oxygen, they need carbon dioxide. So when we breathe out, they take it in. When they release oxygen, we take, it's a good back and forth. And then, of course, that leaves energy. Energy is going to be sunlight in this case. Okay, for photosynthesis, we use solar energy. That would be sunlight. So what does a plant need? A plant needs sun. That makes sense. We put a plant in the sun, we give them water, and then the carbon dioxide comes from the air. They get that on their own. So again, the whole point of using that energy, the energy is being absorbed by the plant to make plant food, which would be glucose in this case. The energy that is absorbed by plants during photosynthesis comes from the sun, and one reason that we have come up with the term photosynthesis is because photo means light. All right, photo, light. You think about taking photos on your camera. Sometimes they have a little light, right? Photo means light. Synthesis means to make. So if we break down that word, photosynthesis, remember synthesis means to make. Okay, so we're making something using light, or making something out of light. The energy in the sugars made by glucose is actually stored in chemical bonds. So the whole point is to convert that solar energy that we're getting from the sun to chemical energy, because we being plants can use that chemical energy, so they have to convert it from solar to chemical. And a good way to think about this is they're creating a bond, they're creating glucose, so they have to produce or make chemical bonds, and that's where the chemical energy is stored. I think about it as if you're dating someone, or if you have friends around, if you hold their hands, like when you meet up after class and you hold their hands and you're walking to class, which don't do that because we're in COVID right now, but in the past, just picture in your head, you're holding hands, walking to class, you have formed a bond with that person, and there is energy being shared when you're holding hands. Now when you break apart, that energy is released as you separate your ways, split your ways, split your paths. Yeah. Yes. Chloroplasts are found in plant cells. They are the organelle that is responsible for absorbing light and performing photosynthesis. All right. If we recall back from the Venn diagram that we did with animal and plant cells, which, remember, those were the two main types of eukaryotic cells that we were discussing. We had animal and plant. Plant was slightly more complex just because it had a cell wall and it had a chloroplast, or chloroplasts in general. But animal cells do not have those. Okay, so we're only going to find these chloroplasts and cell walls in those plant cells. Found within the chloroplast, we see a molecule called chlorophyll. Chlorophyll absorbs energy that will be used to make glucose, and it's also known as a pigment. You'll notice that both chloroplast and chlorophyll start with the prefix chloro. Chloro means green. Okay, it makes sense because they make the plant green. In fact, that's why if we take a look at this image in the background, this beautiful leaf, almost looks like an elephant ear, it's really green. And that's because of these guys, chloroplasts and chlorophyll. Specifically, chloroplast is an organelle that chlorophyll is found within. Chlorophyll is simply a pigment, and it's going to help absorb that light. Okay, so chlorophyll is found within chloroplasts, and then chloroplasts are found within each plant cell that makes up the leaf. So just to quickly review the process before we move on, we have water, carbon dioxide, and sunlight energy going into the plant. Coming out would be oxygen and sugar. In other words, the reactants, the raw materials that we need in order to make our food would be water, solar energy, and carbon dioxide. And the plant, using those ingredients, are going to be able to make their sugar, which is their plant food, and then they will also be producing oxygen. Now, are there any other autotrophs that can use a different type of energy other than like sunlight or solar energy to make their own food? Yes, there are. We don't talk about them as often, but think about it. The ocean is huge, 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 huge. It's easy for us to explore things on land, although there are still areas that have not, been explored, like the Amazon. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there. But the ocean is huge and vast and so deep, and there are places where it's extremely dark, where no sunlight hits. Turns out there are still organisms that live down there. Well, how do they live down there? There are some organisms that were actually discovered in the 1970s by scientists, creating an entire food web, basically just a bunch of different organisms living together or around each other. And they use these underwater hydrothermal vents, and hydrothermal just meaning that they spew minerals and heat. And as opposed to using solar energy, because there's no sunlight down in that area, that's what they're using, is that thermal energy, that being heat, to form the inorganic compounds that they need using those inorganic compounds to form the organic compounds that they need in order to produce their energy. So cool. One example in particular, actually, I studied this in college. It's really, really interesting. Phytoplankton. We talk about plants producing a lot of oxygen for us, because we as humans, we need oxygen to survive. And we talk about plants producing all of that oxygen and clean air. While that is true, the organisms that are right up there, they produce, I believe, most of the oxygen found on the planet is phytoplankton. They're these really super tiny organisms that are found deep in the ocean, and they also where is it? The image is not popping up. Well, the image that's shown is actually this one right here on the article. They're super tiny, really fascinating, but they produce way more oxygen. And if we ever were to damage our ecosystems in the ocean, that'd be really bad, because they could be affected very easily, and that would diminish the amount of oxygen that we have available to survive, to breathe. Moral of the story, take care of the environment. But yeah, so that's just one example of another organism that creates their own food, another autotroph, basically. And not all autotrophs are going to be photosynthetic, but plants, which we see quite often, are. Yeah. So that is what we have there. Now I'm going to direct you back to Google Classroom, and I would like you to begin working on the photosynthesis labeling. It is the same for both English and Spanish, because there are quick, short terms, and they have a lot of visuals involved. The first thing I need you to do is it's a drag and drop. So drag the correct term into the correct area. You'll notice the arrows going in are reactants, and the products coming out, they have arrows coming out of the organism here. And then the second slide is all about arranging the words and symbols to form the correct equation for photosynthesis. I highly recommend using your notes as a reference guide, and I'll be here if you have any questions. And I'll be posting a short review video going over these answers afterwards. All right, bye guys.